Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas, everybody! My name is Santa, aka Digit, and I've got an entire sleigh full of the best electronic music released in 2022. So I hope your stocking is ready! Honestly, blessed year for electronic music. We got surprise dance albums from The Weeknd, Beyoncé, Taylor Swift kinda. Culprate dropped the sequel to a decade-old genre-bending album that people liked. And so did Savant, who also came in February like, y'all think you know drum and bass? Nah, this is how you do drum and bass. And then Noisia was like, nah, this is how you do drum and bass. Deadmau5 and Cascade got 50,000 Californians to leave the house in sub-40-degree weather. Space Laces released music. Swedish House Mafia came back. Odessa came back. Carl Cox came back? I didn't even know he was gone. So how do you distill all that and more into a top 50 list? Number 1. Obviously, the songs have to be primarily electronic, but other than that, everything is on the table. Singles, album cuts, originals, remixes. I tried to keep it as diverse as I could, but it's still pretty biased towards EDM, so feel free to educate me with your favorite generative ambient composition in the comments, and I will ignore it and go listen to my dishwasher. Number 2. The songs have to be on Spotify. I know, I'm cringe, I'm striving to do better. Moving on. Number 3. Only one song per album is allowed, and only one song per artist. And if there be a remix on this list, then the remixer shall be considered the artist. Just like last year, I couldn't resist bending this rule for one person. You'll find out who it is later. I also have some honorable mentions that didn't quite make it onto the actual list. Sacrifice by The Weeknd, which was definitely good enough to make it onto the actual list, but also so popular that I didn't really see the point. Techno by Frankie Nuts, for understanding that how big a dubstep drop feels has less to do with the sounds you use and more to do with the sense of space you create. Sekulin by Halogenics and Sparks for having the firest MC feature on a drum and bass track that I heard this year. Wet Tennis by Sophie Tucker for being so ridiculously over the top and high effort when it could have easily felt like a cheap Purple Hat sequel. Right Through by Cage and Aztec for doing a very particular rhythm in a bass house drop that I've always wanted to hear. Open Arms by Boxplot and Audioscribe for being the type of drum and bass that characters in a Jane Austen novel would probably slow dance to. It makes sense when you hear it. Licorice Tea by Truth for being incredibly groovy. Full Assault by Varian, Scylla, and Jackie Extreme for being incredibly insane. And If by Tutara Peak and Milan Ring for being incredibly earnest and beautiful, but still getting edged out by another one of his songs. Also, all of the songs from the Break-Ins album. Yeah, none of those are on here. Partly because I only listened to it about a day before writing this, but also because I feel very strongly that the best way to listen to those songs is all together as an album unit. And if that still doesn't satisfy you, I have a whole second Spotify playlist longer than the one accompanying this video, full of other tracks I enjoyed but didn't have as much to say about. So you can check out both at the links in the description below. Whew! All right. Are you ready? Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come! Starting off with a weird one. I actually think this is good enough to be higher, but it's also the last song I added, so it would feel weird to diss some of the other tracks I've sat with for longer. Some of Igloo Ghost stuff leans a little too avant-garde for me, but this track strikes a great balance between glitchy and tasteful. It's definitely the classiest hardcore beat I've ever heard for sure. Ah yes, 2 songs in and we're already stretching the definition of electronic. But without all of his EDM experience, Grizz would never be able to get a funk hip-hop beat to sound this thick. It's one of the most lush instrumental productions of the year, and if you like that, there's 8 others like it on Chasing the Golden Hour Part 4. So here is an artist that has her sound, her style, her brand all figured out. And this instrumental showcases it better than any of the vocal collaborations she released in 2022. It's future bass elevated with a great melody, a wistful atmosphere, and even a little bit of tempo experimentation. And it might be the most pleasant headphone listen on this list. This was the very first track I added to my Best of 2022 shortlist, and it's managed to stick it out all the way to the end. Why? Well, it's a multi-phase drum and bass odyssey that just gets more engrossing with each new section. And on top of that, it's one of the catchiest things any of these three artists have released this year. There are a lot of overly sentimental melodic EDM tracks out there trying to bait your emotions, and this is somewhat unique among them in that it actually works. Why is that? I think the name of the game is restraint. It's got a beautiful melody and a nuanced vocal performance, and it's smart enough to know that an over-the-top drop would just take away from that. When I first heard this song, I was so shocked that I immediately had to text my friend Sam, like, what year is it? It's like you reached back to 2011 and yanked Bro Step into the present day, dressed it up with some modern production, slapped it on the ass, and sent it out the door. It's got the catchy hook, it's got the unpredictable rhythmic bass growls. If you like this kind of music, it's unmissable. Definitely a contender for best title of any electronic song this year. It's unique, searchable, and lets you know exactly the vibe you're in for. That vibe being breakcore in the sky with diamonds, but it's a lot more restrained than most of what I've heard in that style. And it's a great one to reach for whenever you just need to relax and breathe for a minute. And once again, a rock drum and bass crossover with questionable songwriting manages to get into this list on the strength of the production, because everything just sounds so good. From all the different guitar tones in the intro, to the vocal layering in the chorus, to the rolling bass line in the drop. It's so impressive that I'd be remiss if I didn't shout it out. Come, let's see the world around and ground down, happy evermore. Don't laugh. Nobody laugh at this! My musical taste is getting more questionable by the second. No, there is not a single song this year, electronic or no, that put a bigger smile on my face than this one. It's charming, it's funny, and it's full of great melodies in the bass, lead synth, and vocals. And if blasting this Disney-core bubblegum pop on the way to work in the morning is wrong, I don't want to be right. Mr. Bill and Kill Smith are back on their bullshit, finding out just how many weird-ass sounds and samples you can cram into 3 minutes. And all of them so masterfully controlled that it's still one of the groovier songs on this list. If I was ranking the best drops of 2022, this track would be number 1. It's a very rare song that you only have to hear once in order to get it stuck in your head, and an even rarer song where even after that happens, you don't hate it. It's such a good earworm that it managed to transcend all the weird flume-isms in the production that I normally do not like, and somehow it perfectly matches the energy of that bird on the cover art. Oh yeah, Matt Zoe also came back this year. You never really know what you're gonna get from him, but it's generally a safe bet that 1, it's not gonna sound like anything else, and 2, it's gonna be a banger. This is dark, industrial electro with a shape-shifting riff that could have easily been repetitive, and it makes me happy that labels are still letting him do pretty much whatever he wants. Sometimes after I spend hours combing through EDM and find nothing that interests me, I start to wonder whether this genre was ever any good, or if I only like the tracks that I do because of nostalgia. But then I find something like this, and I get just as excited as I did when I was 13. Electro House needs to come back. That's all I'm saying. This song initially stuck out to me because I've never seen this vein of city pop packaged outside of like YouTube anime playlists, but it weirdly makes sense that it would show up as a remix for an album that was kinda halfway to being nightcore already. It's great though, it's punchy, it's groovy, and it's got a very entertaining twist ending, and I guarantee you, if you play it while you walk, you will swing your arms 50% wider. For someone with perfect pitch, I could actually see this ending up on a worst of the year list because of the way the piano drifts slightly out of tune. But luckily, I don't have perfect pitch, so I can just enjoy the mellow house vibes and inspired sampling. The drums in particular get really fun towards the end. Chime has been on the cutting edge of dubstep for years, and I love how between this and Cloud Factory, he's been trying out new grooves for dubstep drops, this being the more fun one of the two in my opinion, and a real breath of fresh air for a genre that often pushes melody and rhythm to the wayside. This isn't quite as catchy or memorable as the stuff we got on my favorite EP of 2021, but the ambition of Tutara Peak's instrumental arrangements make a song that's pretty good for him unattainably incredible for everybody else. So check it out for the most unique listening experience on this list, and then for the love of God, go listen to Tansuri if you haven't. Picking a single song from the 2.5-hour drum and bass behemoth that is Savant's Krang was the second hardest decision I had to make when putting together this list. And I settled on Betrothed because I think it just has the tightest songwriting. The different sections flow up and down and tie together perfectly with a common turnaround at the end of each phrase. And on top of that, it's just a fucking banger. I have absolutely no reservations about saying that this is the best featured vocal performance on an electronic song this year, which feels like cheating because this vocalist, I'm not even going to try to pronounce her name, is deceased and the recording is removed from its original context, but it was used respectfully and with consent to elevate an already epic melodic techno track into the stratosphere. So if nothing else, check it out for that because this performance will blow your freaking mind. People never out. Get it! No one needed any more proof that Virtual Riot is a master of sound design, but he's still out here flexing anyway. But the most impressive thing about it isn't how crazy the synths or the basses are, it's how tightly they're controlled to lock in with the drums and enhance this funky beat that he's got going. It's tracks like these that remind me of why I fell in love with bass music in the first place. This song just encapsulates everything fresh about Ivy Lab. You've got the off-kilter trap groove, the glitchy, angular melodies, the atmospheric vocal sampling. The first half is bangin' and the second half is chill. And if you pay close enough attention, you can tell that they reused a lot of the same sounds between them. So it never ends up feeling disjointed or like it's doing too much. Am I too late to hop on the Shy Girl train? Because this is one of the snappiest dance pop top lines I've heard this year. I swear she doesn't miss with that stuff. And the chopped up guitars in the instrumental are beautiful too. What separates this from the thousands of other acid house riffs out there? Atmosphere, baby. The booming bass, the scratchy synth, and the huge reverb all have this rawness to them that just place you right in the middle of a sweaty rave, even if you're just listening on headphones. I don't wanna end up. I'm just jealous of this. How do you zero in on such a complete artistic vision at such a young age? This was the first track of theirs I really clicked with, and if you haven't heard it, do yourself a favor and get acquainted with one of the most unique sounding producers in EDM right now. Definitely not the most obvious pick from the new Mode Rat album, but I will stand by my opinion that it is the most beautiful track on there. It sounds like a church choir made up entirely of computers. The harmonies are heavenly, and I just wish it was longer. Ooh. Don't go away. It's the top 25. We're getting into the real good shit now. Superman. 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 Well, here we have the nicest surprise of the year. For one, because I didn't think we were ever getting any new music from I.O. again, but also because the warm piano and trance synths are so far removed from the intense techno that he initially became known for, but those biting drums are still there to tie it back and work surprisingly well with Lights' intimate vocals. Okay, hear me out. Space Laces is the Ernest Hemingway of EDM. Other producers will try to stand out with the flashiest sound design and the biggest drops, but this track strips bass music down to the barest essentials. He leaves so much space to get the groove and the mix exactly right, and it makes for one of the most satisfying bass music listens of this year. 2022 was the year I was introduced to the king of making experimental electronic music dummy danceable. The beat itself is pretty minimal, but he throws in so many little production flourishes and makes such good use of dynamic range that you stay engaged all the way through. Pretty impressive, considering that it's 7.5 minutes long. And the Good Bot Award for Best Track recommended to me by the Spotify algorithm goes to... At first I thought it was going to be just another lo-fi house beat that doesn't really go anywhere, but it builds so subtly that you don't even notice until all the layers drop out and you're just left with this Blue Man Group PVC pipe bass line that's as punchy as anything on this list. One of the best structured songs of the year for sure. Here's one that just deserves more plays. Dark and cinematic bass music that hits just as hard as productions by way bigger artists. But it really comes into its own in the second half with an atmospheric interlude and a truly massive second drop. I'm really looking forward to see where Corva goes from here because it's clear that the talent and production ability are all there. If my tastes as a critic were different, I might call this a collision of hyperpop and EDM at their most vomit-inducing. But in case you haven't figured it out by now, that's exactly the type of shit that I like. And don't let the harsh synths distract you from the fact that it's got one of the catchiest choruses of the year.
For any boy that talks, if a boy chats, then shy girl walks. Done with bitterness and long talk. Sick of this bitch, won't be a hollaback.
So the hardest decision I had to make when putting together this list was whether or not to break my own rule and put Shy Girl on here twice. And if you've ever wanted to hear Channel Trace talking dirty over what sounds like the Mario Galaxy Honey Hive music, well, first of all, weirdo, but this is the song for you. Always gotta be reppin' my batshit insane music. While the other sound designy tracks I picked have this air of expert production and masterful control, this feels like it's constantly on the verge of falling apart. But it never does, and that off-the-rails quality makes it go all the harder. So many people across genres have imitated the Skrillex pitched-up vocal chop at this point that it's moved beyond cliche to become a bona fide staple of popular music. But I swear to God it still hits different when he does it. And Noisia, not really known for their melodies, but there are so many great little ones in here. It's not my favorite drum and bass track of the year, but it is the most beautiful. Potentially controversial statement time. Best mixed song of the year? Any genre? The lyrics are a little confusing and that's why it's not higher, but everything else, oh my god. The low end is locked in, the guitars are crisp, and the vocal production is unfuckwithable. You know they're flexing when they bring in the gang vocals for one line and then never do it again. Whew. It's getting hot. We're in the masterpiece zone now, baby. From here on in, couldn't find anything wrong with these tracks if I tried. Best opening track of any electronic album this year? This one. Not only is it an explosion of Technicolor synths and vocal chops by itself, the range of musical styles he pulls together here perfectly sets you up for the epic smorgasbord of sound that is the Cry Sugar album. It's not going to be for everyone, but I do think everyone should at least be aware of its existence. Another track with an amazing sense of build. It starts out as minimal techno, and by the halfway point, it's this massive expanse of cinematic strings, horns, and synths, never compromising on danceability either. The beat gets pretty intense by the end of this one, too.
Wasted, don't know which way you're facing. You can't hold on. You got to let go if you wanna be free.
When I first saw this collab, I definitely expected to get Disclosure's bouncy synth chords. What I was not expecting was the return of Zed's electro house, but it's more tempered and mature than it was in 2012. This is the kind of dance track to twirl your mustache and sip a cocktail to, but it's still pretty damn fun. John Gooch's incredible production ability has been put to use in many ways, flexing with some of the most intense bass music of recent years, adding warmth and flavor to pop song productions, and here he turns a few sparse synth riffs into the most atmospheric and engrossing drum and bass track of 2022, weaving it together with an incredible sense of tension and release.
Yeah, oh shit, killing rappers, so the reaper racking it up. Red rum sipping round with the savages rough.
I said it last year, and I'll say it again. American rap and UK dubstep are two music scenes that need to mingle. Obviously, the rap verse came first on this, so they built the beat around Jid's lyrics, and the result is an absolutely glorious flow. And the other thing that I want is for somebody to mash this up with Unholy, that Sam Smith and Kim Petras track, because they have the same chord progression, and I'm pretty sure they're in the same key. Whew! Finally, top 10. Time for the big boys. And big girls, because there's women in this top 10. Number 10! When you listen to a lot of electronic music, you're gonna come across a lot of different sounds. Some harsh and dissonant, some mellow and smooth. You'll get sounds that are bright and colorful, weird and unexpected, sometimes even funny. But every year, without fail, there's always that one sound that you just want to eat. And this year, it's this piano sample.
Pull me out of this.
So, in addition to his incredible production ability, clearly, Fredigan's greatest strength is his knack for wringing the maximum amount of humanity from the samples he chooses and the dance beats he creates. I'm sure other people have made this comparison, but his style reminds me of Moby at the peak of his popularity, and I think that bodes very well for how this and other tracks will be remembered in the greater canon of dance music. Number 9! Last year on my top 50 list, I called Gyrofield a very exciting artist, and I'm happy to say that this year she is continuing to prove herself completely fucking unstoppable, dropping 2 EPs and even more singles and remixes, like Retinues, which contains what I imagine the Footloose riff would sound like if it was a Neuro D&B bass line. She stood out from a crowd of Noisia remixers with whatever the hell a Fever Dream mix is, and dropped one of the best dubstep songs of the year with Band Fiction. But my personal favorite of them all is the A-side from that record. This is completely its own thing. The beat is kinda dubstep, but not quite. It's got a hyperpop style chorus and a rap verse. The bass line wobbles and chugs along unpredictably, and the transition between the ambient breakdown and the final beat drop is one of my favorite musical moments of 2022. Number 8! We got a lot of Noisia remixes this year. A lot of very good Noisia remixes, actually. Like the Gyrofield remix of Banshee that I just mentioned, the Skeptical remix of Diplodocus, the Face remix of The Hole, the Halogenics remix of Leopard Slug, and the Turnian Sound remix of Make Those Move. But the best one, in my opinion, has got to be...
They start moving. They start moving.
The very best drum and bass tracks are the ones that keep you just a little unsure of where the beat actually is. And this drop does such a great job of shifting the sounds around unpredictably without losing the skankability. It keeps all the most memorable sounds from the original track and places them in the most ear-catching spots, and manages to make the voiceover samples darker, groovier, even funnier at times. Maybe it's sacrilege, but I think it's better than the original song. Number 7! You ever heard of kitchen step? It's a hyper-specific style of EDM where all of the main sounds or drums appear to have been made by slamming pots and pans together. It's a meme, it's not real, but occasionally you will get a song that sounds like this. And number 7 is not only an example, it's a damn masterclass.
Chin up, down is easy. And I feel as good.
I joke, but the drums are far from the only thing making this track unique. I mean, it's Tennyson, so of course he's not going to stop there. There's a ton of creative vocal production on this one, from the formant shifting in the intro to the ambient background layers towards the end, and his catchy vocal melodies and mellow chord progressions contrast with the choppy instrumental to create a cohesive whole that sounds totally fresh. Number 6! Electronic music is usually all about the instrumental production, and so vocal performances, when they happen, tend to fly under the radar in discussions of this kind of music. But for number 6, I want to talk about the gold standard, because in 2022, we got an entire album of it.
Unicorn is the uniform you put on, eyes on you when you perform.
Every line of Alien Superstar is dripping with sensuality and charisma. At every turn, you've got a snappy lyric or vocal flourish impossible for nearly anybody but Beyoncé to pull off. The perfect combination of professional writing and authentic performance, and all of them delivered with the magnetic energy that's kept her at the top for decades. So my advice for all you bedroom producers is, just be more like Beyoncé. It's that simple. What are you freaking out about? Number 5. Another potentially controversial statement from me. I actually was not crazy about the new Culprit album, but I thought the best moments came when he leaned into the glitchy IDM style that made projects like Others so good. And the highs were very high. It is futile to try to predict where this song is going to go. From fully electronic, experimental drum and bass, to a kick-ass bass solo, to what sounds like lounge jazz on 2 times speed, the different sections are clearly distinct, but transition so seamlessly, and a repeating chord progression ties the whole thing together. Number 4! So, if the Culprit track is epic because of its experimentation and compositional ambition, number 4 is epic in a much more traditional sense, in that you are not gonna find a bigger motherfucker of a dance track than this one. You wouldn't think that a song could ever be too good, but I honestly think Odessa cursed themselves with this one. It was such an incredible lead single that the rest of the album kinda got crushed under its massive weight. The synth plucks are cavernous, the lumbering bass solo has the stomping power of an entire city, and Betty LaVette's sampled vocal sounds like it's being beamed out to an entire galaxy. Yeah, there was never any shot that they followed this one up. Number 3! What do you imagine people do when they listen to dubstep? Headbanging? Tripping? Gaming, maybe? But probably not dancing. The vast majority of producers just don't design it for that. But Tipper is not the vast majority of producers. Straight up, this is the grooviest thing I've heard all year. If those drum breaks aren't compelling you to move your body in some way, you're dead. You are a corpse. The amen break, acid basses, and scratching samples may give it an old school flavor, but make no mistake, this is dubstep from the year 3000. And you could probably count on one hand the number of producers who have the level of mastery over things like drum transients, mix balance, synth envelopes that you would need to pull off a beat like this. Number 2! As a child of early 2010s dance music, one of the things that shaped my musical taste the most was was the pure synth-driven euphoria of progressive house. I'm talking about the biggest hits of artists like Deadmau5, Cascade, Swedish House Mafia, and my nostalgia has kind of made me despair that any new music could ever give me that particular feeling again. I didn't get it from the new Swedish House Mafia. I didn't really get it from Fred again because his style is so sample-driven. I didn't even get it from KX5, which is Deadmau5 and Cascade. But I did get it from Tisha. This track is just beautiful, from the warmth of the bass to the string swells midway through to that euphoric synth lead. And, crucially, one of the best vocal performances of the year from Clementine Douglas. But I love that, unlike most vocal dance tracks, this one isn't afraid to take its time and dive into extended instrumental passages too. And that makes for one of the most cathartic endings I have ever heard in an electronic song. Number 1! It's kind of hard to pick a number 1 song of the year. This spot has to be reserved for a song that's not only well made, but so distinct in style that it transcends genre and could only have come from one artist's creative vision. Like, when you hear it, your reaction isn't just, wow, that kicks ass, but also, I can immediately tell exactly who made that. And this year, from the month of February, I don't think there was ever really any competition.
Oh yeah, you're always on my mind.
I could have easily picked any of the tracks G. Jones released in 2022 here, but this collaboration with EPROM has got to be the most forward-thinking of them all. They pulled together trap, dubstep, and acid house to create something that doesn't really fit in any of those genres. It's got the most insane and jittery production of the year, but that's not really why it's so good. It's because all of the wild and glitchy sounds orbit around some legitimately catchy melodic hooks like a giant Katamari ball, reinforcing their rhythms and creating variations in the melody. You can tell how much care went into every aspect of the song. So with all of that taken together, that's why I think On My Mind by G. Jones and EPROM is the best electronic song of 2022. So, that'll do it for my list. Like I said, I've got a Spotify playlist in the description featuring all 50 of these songs, plus a second playlist with even more electronic music that I enjoyed from this year. Obviously, I didn't listen to everything, so if I missed any of your favorites, drop them in the comments, and I'll let you know whether I still need to check them out, or if I did and just didn't love them as much as these. And if you dig this video, I would highly recommend subscribing. Not only will you get more electronic music content like this, but it's the only way you can be sure it won't be me climbing down your chimney this Christmas Eve. I can see how many of y'all clicked the button. But anyway, my name is Brian, aka Digit. This has been my favorite songs of 2022, and I will see you next year. Oh.